Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make an eggnog pie, gluten-free of course, and this is going to be about a 9-inch pie. I have a really cute festive pie dish here. It's perfect for something like this. And then right here I've got some of my gluten-free graham crackers. This type of pie, you could use your favorite crust. It really doesn't matter. You could just make a regular pastry crust, but I really like this pie with a graham cracker crust. And I think I've mentioned before, whenever I make crackers or graham crackers, I usually make a double batch and I put half of it in the freezer, and then I've got my graham crackers for something like this. You could even process all of your graham crackers and make crumbs and then just freeze the crumbs. And you don't have to have a food processor to make a graham cracker crust. You would just seal up your bag and give it a beating with a rolling pin. But you know, a food processor just makes such fast, easy work of it. For this crust, we need 2 cups of my graham cracker crumbs. There's 1 cup. And for that matter, you could make this pie with any kind of cookie. A ginger snap crust would be really good with this pie filling. And you could also add nuts to your graham cracker crust. That would be really good. Making such a mess. That's my 2 cups of crumbs. Get all of this that didn't make it in the bowl. And then there is just a little bit left in here. I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Not really enough to save for something else. And it's okay if there's a little bit more than 2 cups in there. I would say it was not even a tablespoon of extra crumbs. I've got a ½ teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon. That was a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just going to mix that together. If you make your graham crackers with cinnamon in them, then you can omit the cinnamon in here. But I really like the cinnamon in the crust for this recipe. And then I've got 6 tablespoons of butter, and it's melted. There's still a couple of chunks in there, but when I mash it around, they melt. And then I've got a glass here for pressing in our crumbs. So I'm just going to pour my butter in. And then just give this a really good stir with our crumbs. And you want it to look like wet sand, where it's starting to clump together, but it's not super dry, but it's still kind of crumbly. And if you feel like you don't have quite enough butter in with your graham cracker crumbs, you can add a little bit more, just a little bit at a time. And just keep stirring it around. Even if it seems a little bit too crumbly right now, you don't want to add in too much extra butter because then it will make it a greasy pie crust. And then you can always just pick up a little bit and squish it together. And if it holds together, then this is what you're looking for. Bring over your pie dish, and I'm just going to dump all of my crumbs in the middle. Level them out. And then I've just got a glass here. It's a flat bottom. And I usually start in the middle first. And even if your crust is starting to spill over the sides, that's all right. We'll get to the edges. And you really want to press your pie crust so it will stick together. And I forgot to preheat my oven. Preheat your oven to 350. And then I use the glass and go along the edge, but then I also hold my finger here along the top and press down at the same time. That helps it so it doesn't spill over the top, but it also helps press it down at the same time. And then I try to make sure that it looks even thickness all the way around. And then I really want to make sure that I have enough in the corners to hold a slice of pie, but not so thick that it's a really thick corner piece of your pie. And sometimes you never really know how good of a job you do until you go to cut your pie. Since I didn't preheat my oven when I was first starting, I have to wait for that to preheat. And that's at 350. This will go in for a pre-bake about 7 to 10 minutes. You don't want it to be burnt, but you do want it to be pre-baked. Graham cracker crust is a little challenging to tell because it's already golden brown. I'm still waiting for my oven to preheat. So before I throw my pie in, I don't want to start making the filling because once you kind of start whisking it, you can't stop. But I can get other things ready. So I've got 1.5 cups of milk here. I'm going to pour into my saucepan. And then I can use my measuring cup here for my egg yolks. And I like to leave just a little bit of milk in my bowl. So when I whisk my egg yolks together, sometimes if you leave egg yolks out, they develop a skin. So having a little bit of milk in this bowl will help them to not develop a skin. Save your egg whites. You can use those for something else. And I've said it so many times before. The easiest way that I think to separate egg yolks is to just pick them up. And for a cream pie like this, you really want to make sure that your eggs are at room temperature. And whenever I'm making a custard pie or a cream pie like this where you use the egg yolks, I always do pick off the little white bits of the yolk. Or if you don't want to do that, then you would just strain your custard mixture through a really fine strainer and get out all of those bits. You don't have to do that, but I always like to. That way, those little bits don't ever cook down. So in your smooth cream pie filling, you'll have a little chunk of egg. Although you could just strain that mixture out after it's done cooking and get all of those little bits out. So now that my oven is preheated, I can put in my pie crust. I'll check it at 7 minutes, but I might go to 10 minutes. So it really is hard to tell, but it is a little bit darker when it's pre-baked, and then you can smell it. You can smell that it is starting to smell like toasted graham crackers. We want this to cool off completely. You could have made this yesterday, so while that's cooling off, we can get our filling going. I do have an extra bowl here. We'll get to that in a minute. And then over here, I've got my 1.5 cups of milk in my saucepan here. I'm going to add in a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 cup of honey. And then I've got my 4 egg yolks, and then I do have a hot pad here. So the first thing I like to do is whisk up my egg yolks. And I'm going to turn my burner on medium. And we don't have to stir this constantly yet, but that honey does kind of clump together in there if your milk is cold right out of the fridge. So we want this to come up to a boil. At this point, we don't have to stir it constantly, although I do stir it pretty often just to make sure all of that honey, cornstarch, and salt are getting mixed in. And then periodically, I will stir my egg yolks just to make sure they're not getting a skin. Once your milk, cornstarch, honey, and salt start boiling, time for 1 minute, and you do want to stir it constantly. If you feel like it's boiling too rapidly, you can turn down the heat. And then very quickly, and while whisking, pour half of this mixture into our egg yolks. This is called tempering our egg yolks. And then we'll pour all of it right back into our saucepan. And then once it comes back up to a boil, we'll boil and stir for another minute. Once this has boiled for another minute, this is where you would strain out your mixture if you felt like you had curdled it. We'll move it over here to our hot pad, and then we'll whisk in our 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla, and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. Once you've got the nutmeg, vanilla, and almond extract all mixed in, So now I've got a separate bowl here. We're going to pour this in. I've got another cooling rack here. You could put some plastic wrap directly on the surface, but I like to be able to periodically stir it. That will help it from developing a skin, but also it helps to cool it off quicker. We need to cool this off for about an hour. And so I like to also put it on a cooling rack. I don't like to leave it to cool off in my pan because the pan is still hot and it might continue cooking this when we don't want it to get cooked anymore. So my custard is, it might feel just a barely warm on the bottom, but I have let it cool off for about an hour. And then I've been stirring it every so often, and it might look a little bit chunky like this. But it hasn't developed a skin. And then my pie shell, it doesn't feel warm at all. It's completely cooled off. And then I've whipped up 1.5 cups of heavy cream. And it's pretty stiff peaks. And we do want to fold this gently into our custard filling here. But what I'm going to do first is take a little bit and then use my hand mixer. Get everything off the side there. And then use my hand mixer, so just on low speed. And I always like to beat in a little bit of whipped cream to start. It helps to smooth out my custard filling, and it helps to get that first little bit of whipped cream mixed into the custard, and then it helps lighten the custard so we can fold in the rest of the whipped cream. So I'm just going to go a little bit at a time and then fold in the rest of the heavy cream. And this is unsweetened heavy cream. I didn't add any vanilla, I didn't add any honey, nothing at all. Just plain heavy whipped cream. Go a little bit more. That is the last of my whipped cream. We'll just fold that in. Make sure to get all the way to the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but when I turn it over, you can see a darker streak of the custard. And then just keep gently folding this in until you've got all of your whipped cream mixed in and everything is a pretty uniform color. You don't want to cut into your pie and have a streak of yellow custard or a streak of white whipped cream. And then I periodically scrape off my spatula just to make sure I don't have anything on my spatula that isn't getting mixed in. Once you've got that all folded together, bring over our graham cracker crust. And then I just start plopping it in. And then I gently smooth it out. Make sure it goes all the way to the edges. Scrape off my spatula. I'm going to make sure to get all of it. And then what's left on the spatula, I can taste it and make sure it's delicious. I've got a piece of plastic wrap here. It will stick a little bit to the filling, but that's all right. I'd rather have the plastic wrap on there than not have it on there. So I kind of have it loosely on there, as opposed to other cream pies where you press the plastic right on the filling. And if you really wanted to, you could stick toothpicks in here and then your plastic wrap wouldn't bother the top. But this is fine. So this has to go in the fridge for at least 4 hours. Overnight is best. Here we are tomorrow, the next day, after my eggnog pie has been in the fridge all night long. Now this is where we see how much our plastic wrap stuck to the top. Really not bad at all. Just barely a little bit. Not enough to really disturb the top of our pie. It's a very soft cream filling, but make sure you get all the way through to the crust and through the crust. And make sure to clean off your knife. There's so many times that I forget to clean off my knife. And the first piece is always a challenge to get out. But I did see recently on another cooking show that if you cut another piece, it makes the first piece come out easier. So let's give that a try. I never really paid attention because usually when I'm cutting pie and serving pie, aside from here on my channel, I usually cut the whole thing. And this is also where we find out how good of a job we did pressing our crust into the pie dish. Very carefully. Oh, look, that's coming out nicely. It sure looks good. Now this kind of pie, it's a softer filling. If you were to make, I'm trying to see if you can see that. I do have some little crumbs here. I'll eat those. So this kind of pie, it is a really soft cream filling. It is firm enough to hold a slice, as you can see, but once you're done serving this, you really do want to refrigerate any leftovers. If this kind of pie is left out at room temperature for too long, it will get even softer. And it looks just like eggnog because it's an eggnog pie. So let's give it a bite. And my crust is really holding together well. So good. It's such a light pie. It's not as dense of a filling as like a chocolate cream pie or a coconut cream pie. Super light and fluffy. It tastes just like eggnog. It's not as strong of an eggnog flavor as if you were to drink a glass of eggnog, but it really is delicious. And the nutmeg in there, and that little bit of cinnamon in the crust, and of course the almond extract. It really, all of it comes together to make it taste just like eggnog. Super delicious. And a pie like this, I usually don't serve it with anything. You could put some extra whipped cream on top. You could serve it with some fruit on the side or on top. But I don't think it needs any of that. And because we folded in so much whipped cream to the filling, I don't know that it would taste any better with whipped cream on top. I think it might actually take away from the light eggnog flavor. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. This pie is perfect for any holiday party, any Christmas dinner, a New Year's party. That's coming up too. I think it would even be a nice dessert to go along with brunch. And I do recommend one regular size piece, for me at least, is kind of a lot. I love eggnog, but just a little bit at a time. And so a pie like this, even though it's a lot lighter than a glass of eggnog, it still is really rich. So I would recommend, unless you are an absolute eggnog lover, that probably just half of a regular size piece is what would be best. And then of course you can serve more people out of your pie. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.